Lesson 31 is on adding integers and collecting like terms. And for adding integers, you can remember the row, row, row your boat song that says same, sign, add, and keep, which means if the two integers that you're adding have the same sign, you just take the numbers and you add them, and whatever sign they had before, keep it. And then different sign, subtract. And then keep the sign of the higher number. Then it'll be exact. So if they have two different signs, so if I have -4 plus 8, I subtract them. 8 minus 4 is 4, and then I keep the sign of the higher number, which is 8, and it was positive. So then I have positive 4. Versus if I had 4 plus -8, I'd still do 8 minus 4 is 4, but then the sign of the higher number is negative, so I get -4. The Acme Scrap Metal Company pays 45 cents per pound for aluminum cans. Troy wants to sell 54.2 pounds of cans. How much money should he receive? So if I have 45 cents per pound, and I have 4.2 pounds, that means that's going to go on the top of the next fraction, so that it can cancel with the pounds on the bottom here. And this shows me that since 0.45 and 54.2 are on the same, they're both numerators, I multiply them, and 0.45 times 54.2 is 24.39. So $24.39 is what he should get. The recipe for chili calls for 4 1/4 pounds of beans. Asa wants to make 2.5 times the recipe. How many pounds of beans will she need? So we take 4 1/4, and if she wants to make 2.5 times the recipe, she's going to need 2.5 times the 4 1/4. So times 2.5. So if you're going to multiply mixed numbers, you need to first convert them into improper fractions, which means a bigger number on top of a smaller number. So I'm going to take 4 times the denominator 4, so 4 times 4 is 16, and then I add it to the numerator, which is 1. 16 plus 1 is 17 fourths. So 4 1/4 is the same thing as 17 fourths. And then do the same with 2.5. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. So 5 halves is the same thing as 2.5. Now I can multiply. 17 times 5, well 10 times 5 is 50, and 7 times 5 is 35. So 50 and 35 is 85. And then 4 times 2 is 8. So 85 over 8, if I'm going to write that as a proper fraction now, 8 goes into 85 10 times, and then there are 5/8 left over. So 10 5/8 pounds of beans. The atmosphere that we live in is 78.08% nitrogen and 20.95% oxygen. What percentage of the atmosphere is made up of nitrogen and oxygen? So we want to know together what percent of the atmosphere the two make up. So we're going to add them. So we have 78.08 plus, line the decimal point up, 20.95. 8 plus 5 is 3. 13. Carry the 1 is 10. Bring the decimal point over. 1 plus 8 is 9. and then 7 plus 2 is 9. So we have 99.03%. So most of the atmosphere is made up of nitrogen and oxygen. Marcia developed a roll of film and received 4-inch by 6-inch prints. She wants to have one picture enlarged to 8-inch by 12-inch print. What kind of transformation is this? What is the scale factor? Well, as soon as they say the word scale factor, we know right away, even if we didn't already, that this is a dilation, because the only type of transformation that involves a scale factor is a dilation. And a dilation is a transformation where the new image is either smaller or bigger than the other one. So she's getting a bigger print. And how much bigger is the scale factor? Well, she's going from 4 inches to 8 inches, and to go from 4 to 8 you would multiply by 2. And then just to check, the other one should be the same. To go from 6 to 12, you would also multiply by 2, so the scale factor is 2. In 1875, an estimated 12.5 trillion locusts appeared in Nebraska. Write the number of locusts in scientific notation. So 12.5 trillion, we would have 12 trillion, and then 500 billion is what that would be. So let's check. We got hundreds, thousands, millions, billions. Nope, gotta add 3 more zeros. So now we have hundreds, thousands, millions, billions, trillions. Okay, so this is the number in standard notation, and now we need to write it in scientific notation. So in scientific notation, we get one number to the left of the decimal point. So we'll have 1.25, and then the exponent of 10 is how many decimal places we moved. So we have 3, 6, 9, 12, 13 decimal places, I think. Let's count it out here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 places. Patrick has 7 tetras, 4 goldfish, and 22 snails in his fish tank. What is the ratio of snails to goldfish in Patrick's tank? So we find the number of snails, which is 22, to number of goldfish, which is 4, and then we reduce that fraction. Both of them are even, so we can divide by 2 on top and bottom. And we get 11 to 2. So the ratio of snails to goldfish in his tank is 11 to 2. If we're going to simplify in number 7, we need to use order of operations. So we use please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. And we don't have parentheses or exponents, but we do have multiplication and division. And multiplication and division go on the same level, you just work from left to right. So we have, the first thing we're going to do is 10 divided by 5, which is 2. So then we would replace that with 10 divided by 5 is 2, and then we still have times 2. So we're still on the multiplication and division step. And we would do 2 times 2 next, which is 4. And once we've finished all of the multiplication and division, we move on to addition and subtraction. And we can do the 4 plus 4 is 8. In number 8, it's like we have parentheses on the top and the bottom, so we do those separately before we do the division that the fraction indicates. So we have 5 plus 3 times 10. Multiplication comes before the addition, so we have 5 plus 3 times 10 is 30. And then on the bottom, we would do the exponent on the 5 first. So 5 squared is 25. And then we would do the addition on top. 5 plus 30 is 35. And then 25 minus 10 is 15. Both 35 and 15 have a factor of 3 in them. So 35 divided by, a factor of 5. 35 divided by 5 is 7. And 15 divided by 5 is 3. And 7/3 then would be 2 and 1/3. In number 9, we have order of operations with fractions. And we have division comes before the subtraction. And when we would divide a fraction, we flip the second one so that it's its reciprocal, and we multiply instead. So we have 3/4 minus, and then 1/6 times the reciprocal of 1/3 is 3/1. So then we have 3 and 6 are diagonal. 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. So now if I do the multiplication here, I have 3/4 minus 1 times 1 is 1 over 2 times 1 is 2. And I know offhand that 1/2 is the same thing as 2/4. So I'm just going to replace that so that when I do the subtraction, I have common denominator. So now 3/4 minus 2/4 is 1/4. Again, we have order of operations with fractions. So the first thing that I need to do is the multiplication, because that becomes before subtraction. So 1/12 times 1/2, multiply straight across, and we would have 1 times 1 is 1, and 12 times 2 is 24. So we would have 2/3 minus 1/24. Then we need to get the common denominator, so we're going to write 2/3 as something over 24. To go from 3 to 24, we multiply by 8. Whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. So then this turns into 16 over 24 minus 1 over 24 is 15 over 24. And 15, 24 both have a factor of 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5. 24 divided by 3 is 8. So our final answer for that is 5/8. Simplify and compare. The square root of 9 is 3. Square root of 16 is 4. My board just froze. Square root of 16 is 4, and then 3 plus 4 is 7. And then over here we have the 9 and the 16 under the same square root. So 9 plus 16 comes first. So we have the square root of 25, which is 5. And 7 is greater than 5. So the point that they're showing you here is that you can't take and separate them. When you have two things underneath a square root symbol all together, it's not the same thing as if you separate them and have them each under their own square root symbol. Expand 4x, 4 times x plus 2y plus 3. Expand means use the distributive property. So that 4 gets multiplied by each thing inside the parentheses, and the symbols in between stay the same. So we have 4 times x plus 4 times 2y plus 4 times 3. Well, 4 times x we just write as 4x. 4 times 2y would be 8y. And then 4 times 3 is 12. To factor, we're starting with something like this and trying to get to something like this. So I look and I say, okay, what common factor do both 6 and 3 have? And they both have a factor of 3. So if I pull that out, it looks like 3 times 2x plus 3 times y. And this 3 is like the 4 that was out front of each one of these. So I can pull it and put it outside the parentheses. And I get 3, and then what's left over is 2x plus y. Rearrange the numbers to make multiplication easier, then simplify. What properties did you use? Well, the easiest thing would be if I could multiply by 10, and I see that if I was to multiply the 2 and the 5 first, I would have 10. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift the parentheses over. I'm going to have 2 times 5, shift the parentheses, and then times 27. And that's okay by the associative property, which says the way that we group things doesn't change the outcome if we're just multiplying or just adding. 2 times 5 then is 10. 10 times 27 is 270. The addition of the absolute values of two negative integers will always be, well, the absolute value, remember, means that it turns the number positive if it's not already. So if I'm going to add two negative absolute values, for instance, the absolute value of 1, negative 1, plus the absolute value of negative 4, well, the absolute value of negative 1 is 1, because absolute value makes it positive, and then the absolute value of negative 4 is 4. So that's a positive number. Now, the question is it B or D? Because it's not going to be negative and it's not going to be 0. We already proved that those aren't it. Well, if they're integers, that means that they're always going to add to a whole number. You're not going to get a decimal number. So it has to be a positive integer. It will not be any positive number, because then it could be 5.324, and you're not going to get that by adding two integer numbers together. Evaluate, find a plus b plus c when a is 5, b is negative 2, and c is negative 4. So this is practicing adding integers. So I'm going to add 5 plus negative 2 first, working my way from left to right. And they're different signs, so I subtract. 5 minus 2 is 3. And the sign of the higher number is 5. 5 is the higher number, so it's positive. So 5 plus negative 2 is positive 3. And then I still have plus negative 4. And these also have different signs. So 4 minus 3 is 1. And the sign of the higher number is negative, because 4 is the higher number here. So my answer is negative 1. The weight of an object on Earth is equal to its mass times the acceleration of gravity. For the equation W equals mg, find W when m is 5 and g is 9.8. So W equals 5 times 9.8. Well, 10 times 9.8 would be 98, and then 5 would be half of that, which is 49. Classify this triangle by angles and by sides. Then find the area of the triangle. Well, since they're showing us that the height of the triangle does not include these two sides, we know that it can't be a right triangle. And since the height of the triangle is inside, instead of being on the outside, as it would be in an obtuse angle, in an obtuse triangle, they would show us the height right here on the outside. That means that this must be an acute triangle, because it's on the inside, and it must be scalene, because they're not showing us that any of the sides are equal. And we know it's not a right triangle because they are showing us the height in here. If it was a right triangle, they would show us that the height was at the right angle here. But it's not a right triangle, so that's not true. And then it asks, find the area of the triangle. Well, the area of a triangle is 1/2 the base times the height. So 1/2, 6 is the base, 3 is the height. 1/2 of 6 is 3, 3 times 3 is 9, and then the area comes from centimeters, and then squared since it's area. Collect like terms. So, like terms have to have the same letters as well as the same exponents. So, we all three of these have x, but this first one has x squared. The other ones don't have x squared, they just have x. So the like terms are 2x and 3x. So 3x squared does not have a like term, so it stays the same. And then we have 2x's and 3x's, which is a total of 5x's. And then since the -1 or the -1 doesn't have any x's, it stays the same as well. There's no like terms for that one. In 19, we have 47 minus 79. And since I can see that 47 is less than 79, I know my answer is going to be negative. So the easiest way that I know how to do this is I take and I do the opposite. I do 79 minus 47. 9 minus 7 is 2, and then 7 minus 4 is 3. And then since I did the opposite, this is going to be negative. So opposite. The opposite of positive 32 is negative 32. X to the 6th times x to the 2nd. I would do x to the 6th plus 2. And then x without any exponent there is an imaginary 1. So x to the 1st times x to the 3rd would be x to the 1 plus 3. So x to the 8th over x to the 4th. And then when I'm dividing exponents, I have x to the 8 minus 4. I subtract the exponents. So 8 minus 4 is 4. So my final answer is x to the 4th. I have 6 and 1/4 minus 3 and 3/8. First I need to get a common denominator. So I'm going to write 1/4 as something over 8. To go from 4 to 8, I multiply by 2. Whatever I do on the bottom, I do to the top. 1 times 2 is 2. So then this turns into 6 and 2/8 minus 3 and 3/8. But 2/8 is less than 3/8, so I can't take 3/8 away from 2/8. So what I do is I take a whole away from the 6, and I call it 8/8. So I'm going to have 5, and then 8/8 plus 2/8 is 10/8, minus 3 and 3/8. So now I can do 5 minus 3 is 2, and then 10 minus 3 is 7/8. And then 6 minus 3.67, well, that's 6.00 minus 3.67. Borrow from the 6, that makes this 10. Borrow from the 10 makes that a 9. 10 minus 7 is 3. 9 minus 6 is 3. Bring my decimal point down. 5 minus 3 is 2. So this equals 2.33. And we're adding integers here. So we have negative 3 plus negative 12. They have the same sign, so we're going to add them together and keep the sign. So 3 plus 12 is 15, and then we keep the sign, which was negative for both. Same thing in B. We have 12 plus 3 is 15, since they both have the same sign. And then it's negative, so we keep it. What they're illustrating in 23 is the commutative property, which says the order that you're adding those in does not matter. It costs $10 plus $8 per hour to rent a canoe. Brandon and Aaron have $50. Solve the following equation to find how many hours they can rent a canoe. Well, if I have $8 times how many hours they rent it, plus 10, it has to equal 50, because that's all the money they have. So this number plus 10 equals 50. Well, this number must be 40. So 8 times a number has to equal 40. Well, 8 times 5 equals 40. So then H must be 5, which means they can rent it for 5 hours. Express 3/11ths as a decimal number. Well, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to divide 3 by 11. 11 can't go into 3, so I add the decimal point, and now I treat it like how many times does 11 go into 30? It can go in twice. 2 times 11 is 22. 30 minus 22 is 8. I add a 0 and bring it down. 11 goes into 87 times. 7 times 11 is 77. That gives me 3. Well, I'm going to add a 0. I'm going to end up back at 30. So that shows me that this 27 is just going to keep repeating. So it's going to be 0.27 repeating. Then use prime factorization to reduce 27 over 45. So the prime factorization for 27, 3 times 9 is 27, and 3 times 3 is 9. So 27 breaks down into 3 times 3 times 3. And then 45, 9 times 5 is 45, 3 times 3 is 9. So 45 is 3 times 3 times 5. And now we can cross off things that are the same. So 3 and 3 and 3 and 3. And that leaves us with 3/5 as our final answer. Julie wrote a 500-word essay. Following the suggestions made by her English teacher, Julie deleted a 25-word long paragraph. So she deleted it, meaning she took out 25 words, and added a new paragraph 17 words long. So then she added in 17-word long paragraph. How many words long is Julie's final essay? Well, she took off 25 and added back 17, which means she really just took off 8. So 500 minus 8 is 492. Name each property illustrated. 62 times 0 equals 0. That's the property that says anything times 0 is 0. It's called the multiplicative property of 0. And then 27 times 1 is showing that anything times 1 is itself, and that is the multiplicative identity property. Multiplicative identity. Find the missing exponent. X to the 8th times x squared times x to the something equals 15. Well, the rule when you're multiplying exponents is you add them. So x to the 15th comes from x to the 8 plus 2 plus blank. Well, 8 plus 2 is 10, and from 10 to get up to 15, it must be 5. So my missing exponent is 5. And then we're going to simplify. When you're adding, there's no quick way to do these. You have to figure out what each one equals. So 2 to the 3rd is 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8. 2 squared is 2 times 2 is 4. 2 to the 1st is 2. And then anything to the 0 power is 1. 8 plus 4 is 12 plus 2 is 14 plus 1 is 15. Loose birdseed is priced at $4.29 per pound. Raul scoops out a small bag for his bird feeder. It weighs 1.3 pounds. How much will he pay for the birdseed? Rounded to the nearest cent. So he's got $4.29 and he's buying 1.3 pounds. So 3 times 9 is 27. 3 times 2 is 6. Plus 2 is 8. 3 times 4 is 12. And then 1 times 9 is 9. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 4 is 4. Add those together, we get 7, 17, 5, and 5. And then I have 1, 2, 3 decimal places. 1, 2, 3 decimal places. So I have 5.577. And if I'm going to be talking about dollars and cents, I have to cut the number off right there. Well, this 7 rounds this 7 up to 8 then. So that would be $5.58.